Hey everybody, what's going on? Eric here. Hope everyone's doing well out there. We are approaching the weekend. Well, got one more day, got Friday before the weekend. Anyways, I think this thing has sat and dried enough. It's been, what, a couple weeks now? And I believe that this clear coat has more than cured. And time to start working on it. So, this is the back. As you see, nice and glossy, nice finish. A little bit of orange peel in it. Not too bad at all. But here's the front. Now that is just clear coat. There has been no sanding. There's a couple of fingerprints in it. There's been no buffing. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but there is also no raised lettering. So this thing's going to come out like glass. So if I hit it with the glare, you would be able to see the lettering being raised from the fluorescent light glare. So there is a little bit of orange peel in it, not much at all, as you can tell. And I think it's time for a nice sanding and buffing, don't you? So that's what we're working on today. Alright, so what I got here is my flat sanding block, which is just a piece of acrylic. And I have some 800, is it 800? Did I get the 800? Yeah, I did. I got 800 grit sandpaper in here. And the reason why I'm going with 800 grit is I'm not wanting to cut really fast or really deep or add some really deep scratches in this, because I am going to be hand polishing this. And what I want to do is I kind of want to go over this thing and just remove whatever orange peel is inside this. So I want to have a nice flat surface. If there's just a little bit of orange peel inside of it, just a tiny bit, the next grits of sandpaper will get rid of that. So I'm going to get started with this. I got 2 pieces of sandpaper, 800 grit, that has been sitting in the water for a day now. I want to get it nice and saturated. I'm going to wrap it around my block. Dab some of the water off of it, not all of it. This is not a water alcohol mix. If I had bare wood, then I'd use the water and alcohol mix, or if I was stripping this down. This is pretty much sealed in the holes as well. I'm going to have to take a drill bit and open up these holes a little bit, because there's clear inside there. There's also black flat black paint inside there, and it got hit from both sides. So I'm going to have to run a drill bit inside there for the tuners in order for them to fit right. So I'm going to go ahead and start sanding this. Now there was a little bit of pulling around the tuner openings, which is not a big deal because the sandpaper will grab that and flatten that down too. But like I said, right now I just want to level sand this thing out really nice. I'm not rushing it. I'm not going really fast. When you want a nice finish, you do not want to rush it. You want to go slow with it. Take your time. And on a flat surface, you always want to use a flat block. Make sure I get all the way up to the nut. Now I am going to address a few other things that I noticed with this neck. I ended up straightening out the neck. There was a little bit of a backbow in it. I ended up straightening it out with the truss rod and checking to see how well the frets are as far as being level with each other. And they're not bad at all. They're pretty good. But the fret ends need to be addressed. So I will address that and then polish the frets as well. Alright, so as you can see, it's a milky white. You know, right where that is the clear coat. If I see black in that, I will be pissed. So I'm going to go ahead and rub this out with a clean rag just to see how much has been cut. And I still need to go over a little bit more. Like I said, 800 grit is not going to cut very fast. It's going to be a slow worker. I could have went with 1500 with this and got the same results, but it would have taken much more of a longer time to sand this thing flat. And I'm putting even pressure on this block, so this block is not being favored on one side more than the other. Alright, so let's check out what happened here. To me right there, that's good enough. What I'm going to do is switch over to the 1500 grit and then continue with that. Alright, so continuing on with the next grit of sandpaper. Now this is the 1500 grit sandpaper, which is kind of aggressive, but not as aggressive as the 800 grit sandpaper. This will remove the scratches from the 800 grit sandpaper. So let me show you this and how you can tell when you're sanding something and you missed a spot, especially with something that's got a gloss finish. Well, you kind of still see a little bit of gloss. So there's a little bit of orange peel right here that still has to be taken care of. There's some spots over here that are just starting to fade away. The Jackson logo is right where it's supposed to be. And I'm going to remove this with the 1500 grit. Now when you're doing this, you want to make sure you go over the whole area where you went over with the 800 grit. And as you can see, the orange peel over here is almost completely gone, and all this is looking good. Now, like I said, I want to go over this a couple of times to get rid of the paper, make sure there's no buildup on it. I want to go over this a couple of times to get rid of the scratches from the 800 grit sandpaper. So this is going to be like maybe time consuming in a way, but not as much as you think. Alright, so let's see what we got going on over here. Now, the nice thing about the water and alcohol mix, waiting for this to dry is like next to nothing. But since it's got to air dry, you can force dry it by blowing on it. So right there is kind of where I will call it quits for the 1500 grit sandpaper, and start with the I'll start with the 2000 next. It's got a nice haze look to it. I could probably go over it right now with the buffer and really get this thing to shine, but I'm going to do this by hand like I said. Alright, I'm going to have to re-drill the holes out because they got clear in it. One of them's completely painted over. So let's go to the next grit of sandpaper, which will be 2000. Alright, so I have my piece of 2000 over here, soaking a little bit. Now, if this was a larger area, I would be mixing a little bit of dishwashing soap in with the water in order to lubricate the water a little bit. So when I'm sanding on this, the sandpaper is not going to grab. It will kind of move freely. Since this is a small area, don't really have to do that. So I've got my 2000, I've got my little block here. Now I'm going to make sure that there's nothing on the bottom of this block. You want to make sure that it's nice and clean. Got my 2000 grit on here. And go ahead and start going over this thing. wet this quite a few times so I don't get a lot of buildup on the bottom of this paper. Now I can see the difference from the scratches from a 1500 to a 2000 grit. Now let that air dry a little bit. And force dry it. Kind of see if I'm seeing those results right now. Yeah, I'm going to have to go over a little bit more because I can still see the scratching from the 1500. Alright, as long as I'm still getting that milky white look, I'm happy. And the towel is starting to feel a lot softer as I move it on the surface of this. That's another way you could tell how the sandpaper is cutting with this. Yeah, it's looking good. I just need to knock that line down a little bit around the edge over there. This one's alright, but that one I want to work on a little bit more. Alright. I'm liking the way this is looking. This is looking really good. Go over a little bit more with the 2000, and just to show, I am using 2000. All right. Sure, got a little water coming through the bottom over here. Like I said, even though the holes are sealed, still don't want a lot of water going through there. Alright, so if I like the results that I got right now, I will be going through and using the 25 grit sandpaper, which I'm really liking the results. So, off to 25 grit. Alright, so here we are, back again, and we're going to work with the 2500 grit sandpaper. Now, if you notice on this headstock, okay, as I start going through the different grits of sandpaper, if you notice right now how it has a little bit of a sheen to it, where you can kind of see the reflection or get a reflection from the lights that are on the ceiling or my little lights that I have sitting over on top of my counter. It's because each grit of sandpaper is finer than the other, and what it's doing is it's starting to bring back a little bit of that gloss. And you'll notice after the 2500 grit sandpaper, you will start getting a little bit more of a sheen to it. Alright, so you can kind of see it's getting a little bit more of a sheen to it now, to where the gloss is coming back. So I'm going to continue to go over this with the 2500 grit sandpaper to remove all the scratches. I'm not going to record this, I don't think you guys will want to see. Then I'll go into the next step with the 3000 grit. Alright, so it's getting close to the end of the race to get this thing buffed out. Now I've got some 3000 grit sandpaper sitting inside of here. Now the 3000 grit sandpaper that I'm using is different than the other sandpapers because it's technically not a sandpaper. It's more of a sponge material. Here's a piece of it right here. So you can kind of see there's a little bit of a foam in between. The 3000 grit is right here, and this is the backing of it. So what's nice about this is using it on a block, folding it over and stuff. What's going to happen is there's a little bit of padding here, so I can add a little bit of pressure to it or lighten up on the pressure if I want to, being careful with going around the edges. Being 3000 grit sandpaper, it really shouldn't go through the edges at all on this, so I shouldn't have to worry about that. But it's also going to polish the edges as well. Now, the difference between the sandpapers that I've been using and why I'm getting a nice little sheen off of this right now is because the higher the number of the sandpaper, the less coarse that sandpaper is going to be. So, but the only problem with that is that the higher the number you use, the longer you're going to be using that paper, because of the fact you want to remove the scratches from the paper before that. So right now I'm getting a real nice sheen off this thing, and you know, when I point this at the lights a certain way, you almost get a reflection of the lights that are on the shelf above me over here. And yeah, I'm kind of liking this a lot. So if I can kind of, I don't know if I can get it in there or not, but sitting on an angle, I can see it, and you can see these little LEDs up there. So once I let this paper soak, the one thing I've been doing throughout this whole video is I had the 800 grit sandpaper sitting in there for a day because I was going to do this video yesterday, but I decided to do it today instead. I've been letting the paper sit for about an hour, each different pieces of sandpaper. I've been letting them sit for about an hour to soak up as much moisture as they can. The moisture actually helps with the paper as far as being flexible and the way it sands. If you use just dunk it into water before letting it absorb the water, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. You can use this sandpaper for dry sanding, but if you're going to use it for wet sanding, let the paper soak. So I'm going to wait, come back, and start with this. All right, so we got a fresh cup of water, 3000 grit sandpaper, which the bad thing about this type of sandpaper and the foam, it kind of creates, acts like a sponge and holds too much water. So let's get to cutting over here. Get the water out of there. Still got to do a lot more sanding. So I'm not going to bore you with it. I'm going to work over here and show you the happy ending when it's done. I'll come back now. You hear?
Much later.
Alright, so it's been a lot of sanding with the 3000 grit, but I think I've achieved what I am looking for here. And as you can see there, the reflection of the LED lights is more definite now and throughout. So I think I'm going to start hitting it with the rubbing compound. Think so? Yeah, I think so.